In the sprawling, smoky boardrooms of global tech, there's one name that sparks both awe and anxiety: Huawei. A Chinese juggernaut that went from humble dorm room beginnings to commanding one of the most powerful technology empires in the world, and at the center of it all stands one man, Ren Zhengfei. While American tech titans were pitching to VCs in Silicon Valley, Ren was building a behemoth brick by brick, all while navigating the shadowy undercurrents of geopolitics and economic warfare. Huawei didn't just challenge the Western tech order, it threatened it. With cutting-edge 5G networks, sleek smartphones, and hardware faster and cheaper than its rivals, Huawei became the poster child of China's rise. But with success came suspicion, trade bans, espionage accusations, arrests, and a global standoff that made Huawei the face of a new Cold War. This isn't just a company origin story. This is the tale of how one engineer from rural China built a tech titan that rattled the United States and reshaped the global digital battlefield. The story of Huawei is about survival, strategy, and the thin line between innovation and infiltration. So how did Ren do it? And what does Huawei's journey tell us about the future of power in a connected world? Let's dive deep into the rise, resilience, and reckoning of Huawei, through the lens of Ren Zhengfei's vision and the empire he built. This is Stag Research, Mr. Stag, logging on. Chapter 1. Born in 1944 in a poor village in Guizhou province, Ren Zhengfei's early years were marked by hardship. His parents were schoolteachers, firm believers in the power of education despite the political turmoil of Maoist China. Ren wasn't privileged, wasn't politically connected, and wasn't destined for greatness. But what he had, like many other overlooked founders, was discipline and a knack for systems. He studied at the Chongqing Institute of Civil Engineering and Architecture, and later joined the People's Liberation Army, PLA, as an engineer, not a soldier. He was assigned to the military's infrastructure corps, working on telecommunications during a time when China was desperate to modernize. The experience gave him rare access to global engineering practices and technologies. In 1983, following a downsizing of military personnel, Ren was discharged. At 39 years old, with no capital, no brand, and no real business training, he took a job selling phone switches for a small electronics firm in Shenzhen. But within a few years, he was fed up. The gear was unreliable and overpriced. Worse, the firms importing them controlled the Chinese market. He saw a gap and an opportunity. With just 21,000 yuan, about $5,000 USD at the time, Ren founded Huawei in 1987. At first, the company simply resold imported telephone switches. But Ren wanted more. He envisioned a future where Chinese-made telecom infrastructure didn't just serve domestic users. It dominated the global market. And from the very beginning, Huawei wasn't about catching up. It was about leapfrogging. Chapter 2. Huawei's early years were brutal. Operating out of a small apartment in Shenzhen, Ren and his tiny team sold telecom equipment door to door, often literally. But he had a philosophy: no bureaucracy, total sacrifice. Employees worked 16-hour days, lived in company dorms, and reinvested their bonuses into the firm. In the 1990s, as China opened up, Huawei took off. Instead of chasing the glamorous urban centers like Beijing or Shanghai, Ren focused on underserved rural areas, offering cheaper, more reliable gear than foreign rivals like Alcatel and Ericsson. These Tier 2 contracts built cash flow and credibility. Huawei's big break came in the late 90s with the release of its own digital switch, developed entirely in-house. From there, Huawei expanded rapidly into wireless networks, internet infrastructure, and eventually, consumer devices. But Ren knew that to truly compete, Huawei had to become a global R&D powerhouse. He invested heavily in research labs in Europe, India, and later Canada. By 2005, Huawei was competing and winning against telecom giants worldwide. Yet Huawei was still private. Ren refused to take the company public, instead creating an opaque employee ownership structure. This shielded Huawei from foreign shareholder pressure, but also fueled Western paranoia. By 2010, Huawei was a $28 billion company. Its smartphones were quietly edging into the global market. Its networking hardware powered telecoms from Africa to Europe. And yet, no one really knew who owned it, or who controlled it. The whispers began. Was this company truly private, or was it a proxy for the Chinese Communist Party? Ren, for his part, kept quiet. Rare interviews, no flashy speeches, just growth, growth, and more growth. Chapter 3. By the 2010s, Huawei wasn't just a Chinese success story, it was a global force. And nothing scared Western governments more than Huawei's dominance in the race to 5G. Unlike 3G or 4G, 5G wasn't just about faster phones. It was the infrastructure for smart cities, autonomous cars, remote surgery, and military communication. And Huawei was years ahead. The company had poured over $60 billion into R&D, held more 5G patents than any competitor, and could deploy entire network systems at half the cost of Ericsson or Nokia. Nations from Europe to Africa lined up for contracts. But in Washington, alarm bells rang. The US saw 5G as a national security asset, and Huawei as a Trojan horse. The Trump administration accused the company of enabling Chinese espionage. American intelligence claimed Huawei's hardware had backdoors for the Chinese state. Then came the bans. In 2019, the US placed Huawei on its entity list, effectively banning it from accessing American tech, including critical chips and Google's Android software. Canada arrested Ren's daughter, Meng Wanzhou, Huawei's CFO, at the request of US authorities, triggering a diplomatic crisis. Suddenly, Huawei wasn't just a company, it was a symbol, a flashpoint in the geopolitical standoff between two superpowers. Ren responded with calm defiance. He doubled down on chip R&D, launched Huawei's own operating system, and told the media, "The US government underestimates our strength." In 2019, Huawei officially surpassed Apple to become the world's second-largest smartphone manufacturer, trailing only Samsung. That year, Huawei shipped around 240 million smartphones, capturing between 15.6% and 17.6% of the global market. In comparison, Apple shipped roughly 193 million units, holding a market share of about 10.5% to 13%. This marked a major milestone for the Chinese tech giant, especially as it overtook a company as dominant and iconic as Apple. Despite ongoing geopolitical pressures and US sanctions, Huawei's momentum in global markets, especially in Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe, allowed it to climb past Apple in full-year smartphone shipments for the first time ever. By 2020, Huawei's smartphone business was severely crippled, but its networking division remained dominant globally, especially in the global south. The battle for 5G was no longer just technological, it was ideological. Chapter 4. Ren Zhengfei never fit the mold of a flashy founder. He rarely appeared in public. He didn't tweet. He never took his company public. He ran Huawei more like a military operation than a startup. His personal life was equally guarded. He's been married 3 times and has several children. His most well-known child, Meng Wanzhou, served as CFO and was at the center of Huawei's legal battles in Canada and the US. After her release and return to China in 2021, she was promoted within the company, solidifying Huawei as a true family dynasty. But Ren's leadership style was harsh. Internally, Huawei was known for its brutal work culture. Promotions were based on merit and sacrifice. Employees had to buy in, literally. The internal shareholding structure required staff to invest their bonuses back into the firm. Even now, Huawei's ownership remains murky. Officially, it's employee-owned. But critics argue the CCP has significant influence behind the scenes. Ren, once a PLA officer, insists Huawei is apolitical. But in China, the line between private enterprise and state interest is often blurry. Still, there's no denying his impact. Ren Zhengfei turned a backroom electronics reseller into a global behemoth, and he did it without IPOs, without VC money, and without ever leaving China. Chapter 5. The post-ban Huawei is a very different animal. Blocked from Google services, its global smartphone share collapsed. Western telecoms, under pressure from the US, began ripping Huawei gear out of their networks. Even neutral countries faced tough choices. Take Huawei's low-cost gear, or risk losing intelligence sharing with the West. But Huawei adapted. It pivoted to domestic growth, strengthened its chip development arm, HiSilicon, expanded into smart cars, AI, and enterprise cloud. And while consumer products shrank, its telecom backbone remained strong, especially in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. By 2023, Huawei was back in growth mode domestically and resilient globally. It launched Harmony OS to reduce reliance on Android. Its Mate 60 Pro smartphone stunned the world with a Chinese-made 5G chip, suggesting the tech ban had limits. Meanwhile, Ren stepped back from day-to-day leadership. Meng Wanzhou and rotating chairman now guide the company. But his fingerprints remain on everything, from the culture to the strategy. Huawei now embodies China's ambition, self-reliance, innovation, and resistance to foreign pressure. It's still not publicly traded, it's still opaque, and it's still at the center of the West's tech anxiety. But if one thing is clear, it's that Huawei is not going anywhere. Chapter 6. Ren Zhengfei's exact net worth is hard to pin down. Since Huawei is private, there are no public shares to value. Estimates range from $1 billion to $3 billion, though insiders suggest it could be far more if Huawei were listed. But Ren has always dismissed personal wealth. "I built Huawei to survive, not to sell," he once said. He's nearly 80 now, and has signaled succession plans. Meng Wanzhou, despite her arrest and release saga, is considered his likely heir. The leadership model he designed, rotating chairman, loyalty-based promotions, and meritocratic rewards, ensures Huawei doesn't rise and fall with a single personality. Still, Huawei's future remains complex. It operates in an increasingly divided world, where countries are forced to choose between US and Chinese technology ecosystems, where trade is weaponized, and where innovation is both a tool and a threat. Huawei continues to lead in 5G installations globally, even as it's banned in the Five Eyes countries. It's investing in quantum computing, cloud infrastructure, and even electric vehicles. Ren's legacy? He built a company that made the West blink, a tech empire without IPOs, without hype, and without surrender. Love it or hate it, Huawei is one of the most important companies of the 21st century. From poverty in Guizhou to the helm of a global empire, Ren Zhengfei's journey mirrors China's own rise. Turbulent, improbable, and impossible to ignore. Huawei, once a scrappy reseller, became the world's most feared and admired telecom giant. Its story is one of innovation, grit, sacrifice, and unrelenting ambition. But it's also a story of mistrust, global backlash, and the fragile balance between progress and power. As we move deeper into a world divided by tech alliances and digital borders, Huawei remains at the center of the storm. Not just as a company, but as a symbol of China's capacity, a symbol of America's paranoia, and a symbol of what happens when business, politics, and ideology collide. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this origin story, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Stag Research, your go-to channel for business deep dives and founder legacies. Got a hot take on Huawei's future? Drop it in the comments. Mr. Stag, logging off.